At Disney, we learned early on about one group of people to be afraid of, to watch out for. There was one group we were in absolute terror of when they arrived. And when they came in numbers. Disney, of course, has all sorts of special groups that come in. A lot of the groups are a lot of fun. They're wonderful to work with. People are having a good time. But there are certain groups and certain days, certain events, that are worse than others. One of them was the Grad Nights. There was just something about the high school Grad Nights. You get a whole bunch of high school seniors about to graduate, and they don't really have a big care in the world. And while most of them are well behaved, there are a lot of things that go on Grad Nights that are just horrible to deal with. You can look out online, and there's all sorts of places you can read some horror stories about them. Things like this book are a great example of some of the stories that you can find about Grad Night. So we all learned to deal with the high school grads, and you learn what was kind of expected. You learn where to watch for the drugs, for the illicit relationships in the bushes and the hidden places, to watch the entrances and the backstage. And so you keep your eyes out for that to try to keep it down to a minimum. The other nights that tended to have a really pain-in-the-neck crowd were the Night of Joy, which is the Christian nights. There's just something about those nights where a lot of people come in expecting to have a good time. They're there for the concerts and so forth. But the church groups tend to grab people who would never step anywhere near a church and drag them along thinking that suddenly that these are going to become really nice and well behaved overnight. And then they turn them loose with no supervision. It is some of the worst behavior you will ever see. And I don't blame the churches per se, but I do blame them for not being careful with who they bring in and not watching over them and supervising them. They would get into more trouble, cause more vandalism, argue with the ride operators, get in places they shouldn't go, hide in the bushes, bring in stuff they shouldn't, and we would have to deal with this all day long. My word to you, if you're part of a church group, please know your people you're bringing in and supervise them. Don't let them run wild. But we had one group that was far above and away the worst. So who is this group that we were really worried about? The ones that we were afraid of? The ones that had the worst name in all the parks? That was the tour groups. In particular, the tour groups that came from a certain South American country that didn't speak Spanish. They were the worst. Oh, we spoke word whispers about them. When I first started, I heard about these groups, and I was like, oh, they can't be as bad as everybody says. Oh, come on, the stories are worse than what it really is. And then I started working in the parks, and I remember the first time I saw these groups and started to realize that the horror stories and the rumors about them were true. You'd see them and they would be a large group of anywhere from 20 to 50 people, sometimes more. I actually saw some groups that were as much as 150. And each of their leaders would have a flag. Everybody would march behind this flag. They would be yelling and screaming and cheering and clapping, and it was always this huge amount of noise. And you never knew what they were going to do because basic rules of how we behave in parks were not a part of their culture or their organization. Lines meant nothing. My poor family one time, they were in line for soaring, and as they're walking into the line, one of these groups came up at the same time. They ended up with my son at the very front of the line and about 20 people, and then my daughter, and then spaced out after her was my wife, and they're spread out in the middle of this group, and the group won't let them get together. I don't mean just not letting them cut forward. I mean they won't let them go backwards either. These groups love to clap and cheer and shout and yell. And that's all fine. Have a good time in your group. But they would do it at times when it wasn't appropriate. A cast member would be given directions for the ride, and they're all yelling and screaming, so you can't hear anything that's being said. It would be the middle of a show, and they would all start screaming and yelling and doing their cheers, so you can't hear what's being said. It's just like, could you shut up? One of the worst instances with these groups I remember was hearing this call on the radio while I was over in Frontierland. Security over to Splash Mountain! Security over to Splash Mountain! What's going on at Splash Mountain? I wasn't with the character at the moment, so I actually had a little bit of freedom of movement, so I just, what's going on? And kind of drifted back a little bit, and then I hear what's going on. There is a group of them that have all gone over to Splash Mountain. Now, if you don't know, Splash Mountain is a water ride. You get wet on Splash Mountain. And they decided that they didn't really want to get their clothes wet. So, as they were getting ready to get in line, they decided it was a good time and place to change their clothes out in front of the ride. These are teenagers to college, which means you have 13, 14, 15, 16 years old stripping everything off and changing their clothes where everybody can see them. Now that may be fine down where they're from, but can I tell you, people don't go to Disney to see that. Ew! Now, I know that there's other countries, too, that have some of these same issues. There's other countries where the idea of waiting your turn in line is kind of a foreign concept, and, it's every man for themselves. Whoever gets there first gets to go. But usually when you go someplace, you kind of look around, see what everybody else is doing, and follow the rules. But not this group. Not this country. One of the worst things I ever had with these tour groups was the time that I was at Magic Kingdom. I was out in front of the parks, right by the turnstiles where you come in. As you walk through the turnstiles, you can look up and the train station is right there. There's a big planter in front that usually has Mickey's face on it. And sometimes we would bring some of the characters out to that very front area and let them meet guests. So I was out there one time and we're taking pictures of Mickey and Minnie. I'm with Mickey. Minnie's just right over to my side. We've got a rope set up behind me so people can line up and meet Mickey and Minnie right as they first come into Disney. What a great way to arrive. It's a wonderful time. It's early in the day. People are happy. People are excited. And then you start to hear one of these groups. And you can hear them chanting and cheering outside. And you just kind of look at each other and go, oh no, here they come, hold on. And so as we're taking pictures of Mickey and Minnie and the guests, we're watching and we're looking over our shoulders because we know what's coming. This group reaches the turnstiles. They get through the turnstiles, pause for a minute as a group of at least 50, probably closer to 100. And then somebody realizes that Mickey and Minnie are up front. It is first come, first serve, mob rush for them. And they do. They rush us. Do you know how much fun it is trying to stand there when you've got 100 people charging behind you, trying to get to the person in front of you that your job is to protect? Because that's what we have to do. We have to protect Minnie and Mickey. It was scary. When you've got this mob trying to get to your friend, your boss, the guy who signs your paycheck, yes, every week, Mickey signed my check, you immediately take emergency steps. Me, the other photographer, our attendants, which there was 3 or 4 of them, we all immediately linked up hands together, trying to form a chain around Mickey and Minnie so we could protect them and keep the people off. And they're pushing, and they're shoving, and we're trying desperately to hold them back at the same time as we're trying to walk Minnie and Mickey off to the side and get them out of there. I seem to remember a couple other cast members from other places coming up and trying to help. And we as a whole, with this mass of people, had to walk off to a side and get through an exit, trying to push them out of the way so we can get Mickey and Minnie off safely. It was one of the few times I think I was actually afraid I was going to get injured at the park because they were crushing in so much. Thankfully, we made it out. I hope you enjoyed the story. Don't be like these tour groups when you're in the park. Be safe, follow the rules, you'll have a good time. Thanks so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and share. Share a comment with me below if you've got a story of running into a tour group yourself, or when you were part of a tour group and saw something interesting happen. I'd love to hear it. Thanks.